1. I am a 23-year-old male from Germany, and this happened about 3 years ago in the small town I grew up. One day in the summer, me and my friends were having a big party at one friend's house. We had a really fun time with lots of alcohol, drinking games, music, good talks, and the party that first should have just been going on in the garage soon spread through the whole house. So after a heavy night of partying at about 5 in the morning, I was getting tired, and although my friends didn't want me to go, I decided to walk home. I really enjoy walks in the first light of the morning, when the world is still asleep, or I thought it would be. In the fresh air, I would be able to sober up a little before getting into bed. The town where my parents' house is and the village where the party was are very close together. When you walk beside the main road, there are just about 400 meters without houses. But the town lays in a valley with a little mountain in the middle of it that practically separates town and village, meaning there is also another way of about 2 kilometers length on the other side of that mountain that leads through green and fields. For me, it does not really matter which way I take, since the distance to my home is the same either way. There are also ways leading over the mountain, but they are longer. Since I wanted to enjoy nature and not walk through the town, I chose the valley way. I would regret that. The way through the fields is tarred and wide enough for cars, since there are also farmers using it with their machines. But it is forbidden to drive through for private people, and there is also a gate at the end closer to the town. So I put my headphones on and started walking home. It was already bright, and the fog that usually swirls and makes this place really scary at night was long gone. I was kind of cheerful, and I danced a little bit on my way. After about 5 minutes, for no particular reason, I spontaneously looked back. That's when I saw a beige SUV following me about 10 meters distance, and a kind of angry-looking man behind the steering wheel. I was startled and turned the music off, but kept my headphones on. The first thought was that this could be some kind of off-duty policeman from the village that wanted to control me or something. Silly thought, but yeah. I looked back again, and that's when I got really scared. The man came even closer and had stopped the vehicle about 3 meters in distance. I kept walking, but also looking back. He jumped out of the car, left the front door open, took off his jacket, opened the rear door, then threw his jacket on the back seat, left that door open, and walked behind his car and opened the trunk. What really freaked me out about that was this guy was angrily staring at me the whole time he did this little tour around the car. I started to look forward again and really panicked inside. The guy reminded me of a hunter, and I thought, he gets his hunting rifle out and shoots me in the back. I started walking really fast, but didn't start running since there was a small voice of reason in me that said everything will be fine. So when I looked back again, the man was still behind his car, and I had brought about 200 meters distance between me and the car without getting shot. I calmed down a little bit, but that was only brief. I took another look, and the guy was driving again and coming closer. That was that. I started running left through the meadow and towards the hill. There I took a small footpath going upwards to the shoulder of the mountain. I didn't stop running and didn't look back until I was quite high and had a good overview of the field. So with my heart bumping like crazy, I looked down. First thing I saw was the guy still driving along the way. Second thing, there were 2 dogs running beside his car. The guy that made me almost crap my lederhosen was just a lazy dog owner walking his dogs. At no moment had I perceived that he had dogs with him when I was down there. I was still shaking when I finally lay in bed, but the next day I was already laughing about it. I still wonder why he looked so angry at me, but I also find it funny what the guy might have thought after first seeing me dance, then look back and start walking dead serious and later running through the green. I hope you liked my story, even if it turned out harmless or not at the end, but I can assure you, until the moment I was up the hill and saw the dogs, horror was real. P.S. Lederhosen was a joke. I really don't wear that kind of clothing. 2. This summer I traveled alone to Colombia. I stayed with a host family in Cartagena, and met a girl from Brazil named Maria who was also staying there. Maria and I quickly became friends and started doing as many touristy activities as we could during the day, and partying all night. One afternoon we were researching day trips for the weekend when we came across the island of San Andres. We immediately fell in love with its beauty and booked a trip there for Saturday. When we got to San Andres, everything was great. We swam in the ocean, ate great food, had an amazing time with the other people in our hostel. While we were exploring the town, we got sucked in by a tour agency and spent all of our money booking tours like parasailing, boating out of the smaller islands, etc. One of the activities we decided to try was scuba diving, despite neither of us having a license. The tour agency said it would be fine because we wouldn't go very deep, and a licensed professional would be with us the whole time. So we woke up early the next morning, got picked up in a van with a driver, scuba instructor, and a family from Spain. The driver took us to a secluded spot on the island. Now this was a small island, like super hard to avoid people, but this spot didn't exactly have any locals. The whole time we were there, maybe 3 cars drove past. Anyway, the instructor, Jose, gave us directions and safety tips in 3 different languages, and then took the family to dive while Maria and I waited for our turn. After they'd left, Maria turned to me and started telling me that she didn't trust Jose. She told me that while they were speaking in Portuguese, he'd made strange comments about our swimsuits. We were both wearing bikinis and were both young and, I suppose, fairly attractive women. And when she told him that neither of us had boyfriends, he was very insistent that Maria and I must be a couple then. I just shrugged it off as a cultural thing and told her it would be fine. Our turn to dive finally rolled around and we hopped in the water with him. Immediately I realized this was more of an intermediate than beginner dive, but it didn't really bother me. I was excited to see the coral and fish. I could tell it made Maria nervous though, because she wasn't exactly a strong swimmer anyway, and Jose was putting her on edge. At first it was fun. We were swimming and Jose was taking pictures for us on his GoPro. But then he started grabbing us strangely, touching our breasts and making it seem like an accident. Again, I didn't really think anything of it, because we were underwater, and it was his job to make sure we stayed close to him. But it was enough to freak Maria out and end her dive. Maria got out of the water, but I was having a fantastic time and didn't really want to leave just yet. So I stayed with Jose, just the 2 of us. He took me to a different spot on the reef, and we ended up swimming past all the coral into the open ocean. I was really curious on what I would see there. At this point, we were probably about 80 feet or 24 meters deep, which is just ridiculous for someone without a diving license. We'd gotten a pretty good non-verbal communication at this point, and it was like I could read his mind. He took some pictures of me with the GoPro in the open water, and I was excited to show my friends what a daredevil I was. After a while, I started to get tired and decided to head back, and that's when he grabbed me. He started gesturing to me, and from what I understood, he was not going to let me leave until I kissed him. Now, Jose was probably around 40, and I was 18 at the time, plus I had a boyfriend. Maria didn't know about him. But honestly, I really don't need to justify why kissing a complete stranger underwater would gross me out. That's just fucking weird. Ugh. But I was just starting to get this gut feeling that I should go with what he told me, so I laughed and gave him a kiss on the cheek, which he not so sneakily photographed. He looked me in the eyes and shook his head no. I could tell he was starting to get agitated. He took my hair away until I kissed him on the mouth, and repeatedly did this until he got everything he wanted, photographing it all. My gut was screaming that this was the only way this would end without me being drowned, so I improvised. I pretended to be into it for a while, but when I looked behind him and got the widest eyes, the goal was to make him think that I saw a shark or jellyfish. It worked. He turned around and I swam away as fast as I could. Eventually I got to the surface and popped my head up. To my absolute horror, we were super far away from the shore. Jose surfaced next to me and in a kind of irritated voice asked me what I saw and insisted it was safe to go back down if I wanted to finish the dive. By some miracle, Maria saw us and started waving. I waved back to her and started swimming that way. I guess Jose knew his plan was fucked once Maria saw me alive. He sighed and headed back with me. On the drive back, I was super quiet and Maria knew something was wrong. I typed out everything that happened and showed it to her, and she was furious. We ended up buying the pictures Jose took on the GoPro to try and use them as evidence, but he only sent us the ones from earlier on in the dive. Honestly, it makes me sick thinking he probably jacks off with them. We tried to contact the police, but they didn't care. Jose is still out there, and I hope whoever dives with him is smarter than I was. 3. The story I'm going to share with you took place in North Pole, Alaska, in May, year unimportant. The incident I'm going to describe was wrong place, wrong time, and completely unprovoked, which no one believes. Another note, I was still only 20 when this incident occurred, and could not legally own a pistol yet. Also, I was in the army, and if you live in the barracks, you have to keep your weapons in the arms room. So it's not like it's convenient to get that out and carry, as compared to a guy living off post who can keep his gun in a safe in the closet. I know people will wonder why I wasn't carrying, those are the reasons. Anyway, here's my story. On the night of Cinco de Mayo, I attended a party at a friend's house in North Pole, Alaska. North Pole is about 20 to 30 minutes out of Fairbanks. It's a somewhat rural community, lots of houses that are on 1 and 2 acre lots, and mostly all dirt roads off the main road. I was a designated driver that night, and drove 4 of my friends, but 3 of the friends that I brought decided they were going to spend the night at that person's house instead of going back to the barracks. Only one friend that wasn't drinking a lot decided he wanted to go back to the barracks when I was ready to go. We ended up leaving at about 1:30 a.m. As we were pulling into the front gate, we got a call there had been a fight at the party. They said after the fight everyone was going home instead of staying the night and continuing to drink. They asked us to come back and pick them up, but said that they had went to a different friend's house that lived in that same area, because everyone had to leave after the fight. Well, GPS doesn't work that well once you get outside of Fairbanks, and aren't on the main roads. At least not with my shitty Verizon service that night. You could get in the general area, but not always the exact location. When we went to the address that was given, it came up as being in the middle of the road. So we took a turn down a side road to turn around and try to get service so that we could make a call to figure out where the house was. By this time it was around 2:30 a.m. As we turned down the road, there was an old red minivan with fog lights mounted on top, just idling there with 2 guys that looked to be in their late 20s inside. I remember thinking that it looked like something you'd see in a TV show or a horror movie. Just a real creepy-looking van, especially at almost 3 in the morning. We had to pass them to turn around, and they looked at us in a way that gave us a really bad feeling. So we turned around and then had to pass them again to pull out onto the main road. As we passed them, the driver was leaning his head out the window like he wanted us to stop so that they could ask for something. Being that it was almost 3 a.m., we knew it was probably best to keep driving. My friend wasn't able to get a hold of anyone, so he tried mapping it out again. The GPS was delayed due to the poor service, though, and we missed the turn again. We saw a small clearing to pull over, so we pulled over on the side of the road to verify where we were at compared to the street we missed. About 10 seconds later, the red minivan with fog lights pulled up next to us on my driver's side and rolled down the window. I rolled my window down, and they initiated conversation by asking if we had seen a white Dodge pickup. We said we hadn't, and they said, "Okay, thanks." We then asked if they knew where Meadow Rue, the street we were looking for, was. They said it was the first street on the left if we headed back the way we came. We were suspicious, but when we looked at the GPS, it showed that was the road. We found out later that the road was on both sides of the main road. Note: locals outside of Fairbanks tend to not like the active duty military guys, and military guys tend to stick out a lot due to the lack of a beard and long hair and having a military haircut. We started heading toward Meadow Rue, which was about a half-mile away, and saw them pull out and start heading that way behind us. We made the turn into what we thought was Meadow Rue, and this road is a bumpy dirt road, and immediately forks off into 2 directions. One side goes straight up a slight hill, the other side is off to the left and drops down about 2 feet and flattens out. We turned left and dropped down the small incline. The road was narrow, only big enough for 1 car, and lined with trees on both sides for a good distance. The first thing we noticed was a dead-end sign, and that's when we started to get worried. We drove about 20 feet, and then we see the minivan with fog lights turn in and drop down behind us. At this point, my blood turned cold, and I felt a sinking feeling in my stomach. I knew at this point that they were following us. I tried to be positive, and hoped for a split second that they'd hang back and turn off the first driveway, which we hadn't seen a driveway yet. But then I saw them speeding up. Again, this is a bumpy dirt side street, and there's no reason to be going fast. I started speeding up too, and they slammed into the back of my car, backed off, then rammed me again. A few seconds later, we made it into a small clearing like a dirt cul-de-sac. I had enough room to pull forward and then reverse myself back, so I was facing the direction I had just came. While I was doing this, they stopped and blocked the one-lane dirt road. They hopped out of the car, and then one of them shouted, "This ain't Meadow Rue, motherfucker! Get the fuck out of the car!" The one guy had positioned himself directly in front of my car, about 10 to 15 feet away, between the trees and his van. The other guys started walking up to my passenger side where my friend was. They kept shouting at us to get out, but I just gunned it right at the guy in front of me, trying to run him over. He managed to jump out of the way. I thought for sure there wouldn't be enough room between his van and the trees and figured we'd get stuck, but we had no guns and there wasn't a better choice. I thought we'd have to bail out and run into the woods and hide, but to my surprise we squeezed through. It was such a tight fit that both my mirrors collapsed in. I then sped out of there, got on the main road and headed for home. I had seen a state trooper not long before all this, not far down the road. I was scared to death of being chased again, and then run off the road at higher speeds, so instead of slowing down, I blew past the state trooper while doing 90 in a 45, not exaggerating. Since this is extreme speeding, I thought I'd get the trooper's attention, but for whatever reason it didn't. There was only one turnoff on the whole way back, and when I slowed down to make it, the van was nowhere in sight. I still flew back at 90 miles per hour all the way back just to be safe. The next day, we tried to tell our friends what happened. Nobody believed us, not one person. They thought we didn't feel like driving all the way back to pick them up, so we made up a story to get out of it. The guy who had invited us all over originally said if we were serious, that we needed to go file a police report with the Alaska State Troopers. So we went to go file a police report at the State Trooper's office in town. When we filed a report, after giving our story to the trooper, he told us to wait and then he left the room. About 15 minutes later, he came back in and told us to tell the truth. Confused, we asked him what he meant. He said his theory was that we were drunk, driving around late at night after the Cinco de Mayo party, and we plowed into the van we described. He said he thought the owner heard that happen and then came out and confronted us, so we took off. He said to get ahead of the story, we made up the whole thing so we wouldn't get in trouble for wrecking into a car while drunk and leaving the scene. We repeatedly told him that was not the case and said everything we told him was true. Without evidence to prove his theory, he let us go. The next day, he went and checked the area where we showed him on the map. I guess when he didn't find a wrecked car, he knew we were most likely telling the truth. He called and asked us to come meet him out there to verify that was the area, but we told him we did not want to go anywhere near there again. About 2 weeks after that, he called and asked us to come in and possibly ID the vehicle. He showed us a picture of a red minivan with fog lights, and we said that it looked like the vehicle from the incident. He then told us that the vehicle was stolen out of Nenana, Alaska, sometime before that, and it was stolen from an old woman. These guys may or may not have been related to her. The trooper said if any arrests were made, he would call us back. We never heard any follow-up after that. To this day, no one really believes my story. They think we did something to provoke the incident, or just think we made it up to sound cool or something. But it was just a case of wrong place, wrong time. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 3 True Scary Stories, episode 454. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Okay, now if you enjoyed the video, I would appreciate it if you give it a bit of a share. Share it with your friends and family. And if you didn't like the video, then share it with your enemies. Why not? Okay, now as you may have heard me mention last week, I had a package to send off. And unfortunately, I haven't had a lot of luck when it comes to delivery companies with that sort of thing. Haven't really had a lot of dealings with them, but the ones I've had haven't been great. Right, so I knew I wasn't going to go with UPS because they'd kind of screwed me over and just completely neglected to pick up the package after I placed the order. So I thought, well, I did go with Parcel Force, and as I say that, some of you will now be rolling your eyes. Well, how was I to know? But anyway, yes, I thought I'll go with Parcel Force this time because when UPS let me down, Parcel Force is the company I went with last time when I had to send that bike back to Amazon. And they were really efficient and really prompt, no problem at all, so I figured I'll go with them this time. Well, this time I'm waiting home all day, haven't had a lot of sleep because I had to get up early to make sure they'd arrive in a certain window. Can't leave the house because I'm waiting on them, or you know what it's like when you're waiting on something like that. And it gets to the end of the window they were meant to arrive, and nobody. And I go on the website and I check, and it says, pickup attempted. And I'm thinking, no, pickup attempted at 3, it was around about 3:30 they claimed. I'm thinking, what was I doing at that time? Nope, definitely not. Because although I was working, I wasn't really doing a lot of listening. The things I was doing work-related basically only required one earphone over the ear at a low volume so I could hear anything that was going on in the house. So I phoned them up, and it turns out the delivery driver, or the pickup driver rather, went to the wrong house. Now, I will say this for them at least. They did apologise, which is helpful, but it doesn't get my package picked up. And the woman I spoke to on the phone, the poor dear, sounded like she had the flu or something. So I tried. I was angry and yelling at the automated thing, but I wasn't yelling at the lady. I'd never do that to the person. And so she said, "We're very sorry about that. What we'll do is we'll upgrade the service." I selected the 48-hour service because if I get 2 days, that's absolutely fine. So they upgraded it to the 24-hour one, and that meant at least the package would get there when it was meant to arrive. And sure enough, came the next day, picked it up, no bother at all, so at least they did try to make good on it, and we'll put that one down to a negative experience. And, well, I don't usually have to dispatch a lot of packages. But if I ever have to in the future, I suppose I'll try them again and give them another chance. At least the headphones are on their way back to Sennheiser now. I'm just waiting to hear from them. Well, hopefully saying they can fix them. If not fix them, replace them. But I know it's arrived at its destination, so sure enough, good as their word, it was there within a day. No response, no message from Sennheiser yet. I mean, you think they'd give you a little message telling you. I'm just kind of meandering, so I'm going to hush up and head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourself.